Hello, fellow human beings. This is Hugh from QLC Media. Today I'm going to talk about racism in football, something that, we've all probably thought about, but we don't really talk about it too often because, we always presume that things are supposed to get better, people talk about it. But, there are still a few things that need to be discussed. Also, shout out to my friend Ron for suggesting that I do a video like this. It did take a while to get out there, so apologies to him, but thanks for the suggestion. This video is a reaction to the documentary Is Football Racist that came out in 2012, around the time that John Terry and Luis Suarez were accused of racism towards other football players. And also, this video is a part reaction to several articles that I've read through about racism towards black people and also, well, racism towards Asians as well. And when I mean blacks and Asians, I mean in the football industry. I'm not talking about in greater society, because that would be a very long video. So to start off, my friend suggested that I look at the video, and I watched it, back to front. And, there are a few things that puzzled me when I watched the video. Now, the guy that was, doing the documentary, narrating it, talking about it, he was, well, he is, his name is Clark Carlisle, and, he's the chairman for the Players, you know, Federal Association, and he's also been a footballer for, over 2 decades at this point. Obviously, the documentary was in 2012, and this is 2020, so 16 years plus 8. So let's say he's been in the football game for like a few decades now. And obviously, now that he's a former, footballer as of this time, he's, focusing on other things like commentating and, charity work and suicide prevention. Now, when when I watched the documentary, he was, talking to his parents, he was talking to his first wife, and, they were surrounded by their kids, and his wife, talked about how, she doesn't really see her, uh, multiracial children as, multiracial or white or black. She just sees them as her babies. When he went and spoke to his parents about, whether there's racism and whether they've experienced it, the dad was talking about how he used to be semi-pro in football, and how he feels that personally uh, his trajectory in football was, cut short because of the racism, and they couldn't handle it. And also that he faced racism as an ordinary person, and in and out of the football match, in and out of the game of football. What's important is, overall, when I watched the documentary, they were not just talking about racism against black people, like, when, black people are called the N-word or coon or something else, or when they're called the San N-word or whatever, but they also focused on, racial bias, that has to be dealt with by Asian players and Asian fans. Like, they went and interviewed some fans of Wolverhampton, people that were claiming to be of Punjabi origin originally, and they talked about how, as fans, they don't see many Asian players, how the reason why there may not be so many Asian players in, British football, is because, just of some sort of glass ceiling. But they also talked about that with, teenage Asian footballers as well. And they were trying to talk, one of them was like the captain of every team he's ever been in, but he talked about how he could never go pro because, they don't, when scouts go over and check them out, they don't go for Asian players, even if they go to like Asian majority areas. And the same kid talked about how his dad spoke to a black football scout, and the black guy was like, "Oh well, I've been strictly told not to hire any Asians." And I'm like, first of all, like, this kid is playing with mostly other Asians. You're in an Asian area, and your ass is coming all the way to what, to like waste time? I don't understand. The man's being strictly told not to look hire Asians. I mean, that's just one person. But if that is part of a bigger problem, then that's atrocious. It doesn't matter if you're Asian, white, black, Hispanic, or otherwise. Like, you have to understand that you have to look at people's merit and people's talent in any freaking industry, and then choose them based on that, not based on preconceived notions of white people or black people or any other so-called racial group. Because when I looked at the documentary, when I did my other research, it seems that people are still playing up with racial stereotypes created decades ago. Like black people are, really strong and really fit, but they're not that bright. So when they see people like Raheem and Marcus, like when they see people like Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling, buy homes for their moms and, get their money right and not spend too much money, they get annoyed because, that they being, let's say the Daily Mail, for instance, because you see Marcus Rashford, feeding hungry kids, and he's trying to get a kids book club going, and he seems to be doing more than a lot of other celebrities or even the politicians that we elect to sort things like this out. And then the Daily Mail's coming up with these stories about him, buying his family homes and other stuff, just to make him look like some champagne socialist hypocrite. Because he talks about helping the poor, but he's making so much money, spending so much money. I'm like, nah, he's helping out with his family. And they did a similar thing with Sterling, saying, oh, look at what he's bought for his mom, this house, all these homes. And I'm like, they're footballers, they're making a lot of money. You can't tell another person what to do with their money. That's disrespectful. No matter who it is, doesn't matter if you like them or not. But that's how it is. They try and get these young men, and I personally don't believe that it's just black men that they take the mick out of when it comes to what they do outside the game and what they spend their money on. It's not just black people, but the way they do it with these young black men is like, it's like trying to make them look like hypocrites. Like, okay, we all know that these men didn't come from much, and that's part of their character profile. But if they're all got all this money, then the way they spend it is their business. You can't just come up with an article, implying, if not stating outright, but implying that just because they're spending money on their family and they got millions and they're putting in, investments to buy big houses, that they're automatically disingenuous and that they've lost touch with the people. That's not fair. But back to the documentary. I mean, you got this guy called Clark. He's chairman of the PFA. He's been in the football game for decades now. He's played for multiple teams, multiple divisions. And then this man, like, like who probably in his 40s by now, he's out here going up to his family members, going up to different footballers that he's known over the years or that he's had contact with, and asking them, oh, have you experienced any racism? And I'm like, wait, you ain't really asked them this question before you decided to do a documentary? Like, if Luis Suarez didn't do what he did, and John Terry wasn't allegedly, I should say allegedly for Luis Suarez as well, but if John Terry didn't allegedly do what he did, you wouldn't have made the documentary, and then you would have never asked your dad if racism hindered his chances of becoming a fully professional football player. Come on. Like, you ain't never asked any of your black comrades in your football or anybody that you met, oh, do you do with racism? What kind of, like, and then of course the black people, the black players gave the typical answers of, yeah, England isn't that bad. I don't really get really any racism in England when I'm playing for England or when I'm playing for an English team. But when I go abroad to places like Poland or whatever, or Lithuania, people call me monkey this, monkey that, chanting, calling me names. And then I'm like, okay, well, it just shows that Britain still has, Britain's come a long way in comparison to some other European countries. But then if you look at the rest of the documentary, especially if you look at, what's happening with the Asians, the British Asians, doesn't matter if they were born here or not, um, they're still British at the end of the day. Like, they're living here, in my opinion. But these Asian people, they're coming up and talking about how it's very hard for them to get, listed in, in the big leagues. And when you do a little bit of research, not too much research, but like you find out that there are like 11 or 12 Asian players in like the big leagues of British football. And like, if you compare the 3,700 black players there are in British football, apparently only like 0.25% of all the players of British football are like of Asian descent, and some of them are like dual Asian descent. So it's like they're not just Asian, they're mixed race as well, which it's disheartening because that's part of the reason why my friend suggested I do the video, because he wanted me to talk about it. It did take some weeks. I did delay because I had other things to do, so I should have done it earlier, but I'm doing it now because it is important to, talk about these things. Because if it were happening to black people, like if football was an industry where there was only like 0.25 or 0.3% of all players in British football and being black, I would be annoyed. Even though I'm not really much of a football fan, I don't really follow it like most people do. Uh, you know, it would still annoy me. I would think, well, there's some sort of glass ceiling there. There's some sort of racial bias there. So I don't really like it when I hear about that stuff with anybody else, especially like these young Asian boys. They grew up here. Been playing football their whole lives. All they wanted to do is be pro footballers. And if they're not good at the game, fine, don't enlist them. But if they're the best in the league, if they're the best in all their teams that they're in, and you're still not looking at them because you've been told not to pick Asian players, that's a piss take. Maybe like it's annoying, not just annoying, but it's actually baffling. Yes, you can get offended about it, you can say it's racist, but it actually makes no bloody sense. Like, not only is it racist, it's detrimental to the cause. You're trying to get the best talent out there, but you out here presuming shit about every so-called fake race out there. Because think about it. What's white? What's black? What's Asian? What's Hispanic? What's Latino? What's mixed race? What's this nonsense? All these names, they're labels created by these fake scientists that came up with a fake science so that they can prove that white people are better than everybody else. That black people are aggressive and dumb, and that Asians are something else, and that Hispanics are something else, and that white people are the smartest. That's all it ever is. And to this day, we calling ourselves black, white, Asian, Hispanic, and everything else. And then there are all these beautiful people in the world. They're like Native Americans or Inuits or something else that I don't know, or Islanders or whatever. And then they're just called other. Like when you have to apply for jobs, you just have to write yourself as other. Like, these are people. We should just call each other human beings. But within football, when I saw the part where this guy, Clark, he went to frickin' this place in Poland, and they were like, both teams were like white majority. They were like both two local Polish teams playing against each other. And, you know, the second they see one black man playing, they start making monkey chants. I'm like, bruh, what is this nonsense? Like, like, racism doesn't really get to me that much. And as somebody living in London, UK, I don't really get much overt racism at all. Like, I rarely get people giving me grief and making it known that they don't like me because I'm black. Normally, it's the passive, quote unquote, microaggressive nonsense where people, they just presume that you're not that intelligent, or that you're not, well spoken, or they just presume things about you. And it's not just white people, black people do it too. Sometimes when I talk to people, they wonder why I'm harsh. It's not just white people. And then, like, you have people making jokes, uh, talking about projects and ghettos and all this nonsense, white people and black people. And it's just like, I, it's embarrassing for them because they can't get past this, they can't get past this perception filter. They can't get past this perception filter where they can't shake their own um preconceptions of what people are based on what they look like and how much skin pigmentation they got or how little they got. Personally, it doesn't, like anyone who's ever taken a science class knows that your skin pigmentation has nothing to do with your IQ, your emotional intelligence, how good you are at anything, whether it's sports or academics. Like me, I'm black. I was terrible at sports at school, which didn't really help much with the bullying or with the nonsense I took at school. But like, there were white kids better than me. And back to the Asian thing, like, all my Asian friends were playing football. All of them love football. Most, if not all of them, were better at football than me. But when I look at these articles talking about how why Asian people ain't picked, they come up with this nonsense like, oh, Asian people ain't really with the football. They are normally interested in cricket. But if you literally go to any public school, comprehensive school, even private school, where they actually do like mix in a different cultures and races, you'll see that there are people of different backgrounds, black, Asian, Hispanic, There are already, I don't think there are much Hispanic people, but you know what I'm saying? Or white people just playing football. It doesn't matter where they're from. Most people in this country, the UK, like football. Like we know this already. Football is a big thing here. Just like American football is a big thing in America. And yeah, we like cricket, we like tennis, we love rugby, but it's not as big as football in my opinion. Maybe rugby's a close second, but tennis and cricket, we don't really, people don't really seem to care as much, in my opinion. But they try and say that Asians are more for cricket than for football. But that's pathetic because a lot of the Asians that I grew up with in school or outside, they were all about the football. Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Indian, doesn't matter. And you know, I glanced at an article that where Liverpool signed their first Asian player, and it was this Japanese dude, and that was the first Asian player that they ever enlisted. They ain't ever looked at no Indians or no Pakistani people. Like it's limiting because I try to be less left leaning when it comes to my political stances or my world perception. I try not to believe in glass ceilings that affect women or people of color. I know that term is very ambiguous and stupid, but this does look like a glass ceiling because the narrator Clark, he also talk about not just what's happening with Asian kids and Asian people, but he's also talking about how even though yeah there are many more black players than there used to be, and how there are many more black players than let's say Asian players, how there are very few black people in coaching positions or senior positions. Um, like there was John Barnes, he was like a coach for like a few months and then he got kicked out and then he's been spending years trying to get another one. Like that's not good. Like why is it so hard for black people to become coaches as opposed to white people? That was also touched up on upon the documentary. Now obviously the documentary that was it was made in 2012. I've looked at other articles as to why Asian people are not getting the listings that they deserve. They're not getting signed up by these big teams because it's really fascinating. Because racism is not just like something that black people have to deal with. I like obviously like even white people face some forms of racism sometimes. It's not just black people. But with these Asian people trying to get into the big leagues of football, there's different things being flown around on the internet on these online articles. Some people say that there's not much opportunity, that the culture doesn't really allow it, that, like Asian families don't really pursue, they don't really care about football that much, which maybe that's true. Maybe because a lot of Asian families, at least the Asian friends that I had at school, and nobody told them, hey, you should really try football. It was always the same, oh, be a lawyer, be an engineer, be a doctor, be something. Ain't nobody told them to do football. What if they wanted to be an actor? What if they wanted to be a beautician? What if they wanted to be, um, yeah, a sports person, like football, rugby, something else? But no, they had to take the typical things. And then it's like, and then obviously there's what I mentioned before about, people just not scouting for Asian players at all. So there's that. People try and say that, Asian people may not have the build for it. I saw that on one article, which was obviously nonsense because you've seen football. There are people of all sorts of different builds and different heights in football, man, and from all over the world. But perhaps, perhaps it's just like maybe if you look at some of these Asian countries, they care more about other sports than football. That could be part of the reason. But since we're focusing most on what British Asians have to deal with and how they're not getting into the big leagues in British football, you can't use that as an excuse. So to conclude my little my little rant about what I've been looking at, not just from the documentary but from the articles that I've looked at as well, I do like the fact that different types of racism were highlighted and talked about and critiqued. Like when the narrator Clark went and he went to Poland, he saw that there was a lot of anti-Semitism there, not just racism against black people, but a lot of anti-Semitism, calling Jewish people pedophiles, that actual football fans in Poland, calling Jewish people pedophiles for no stupid, no good, no reason at all. Um, how when Luis Suarez, made fun of that other player, um, and they, it was allegedly a racist abuse. The player that suffered from the alleged racist abuse, you had all these Liverpool fans calling him the N word, coon, monkey, all this nonsense, saying that his mom was effed by an N word, all this nonsense. All these Liverpool fans not just supporting Suarez, but actually coming up with a racist trans on Twitter of all places. People that would put their, people that would use their, Twitter profiles to, highlight their own racism. I mean, we're living in a world where people can literally look at your social media profiles to see whether you're employable. So I don't know why people are that stupid. Like, if you're a racist, that's your problem. But if you're gonna ruin your social media profile, good for you. Like, what's wrong with you? And also another thing, there were multiple people that came on that documentary, Is Football Racist? Like this comedian, yeah, so this comedian Ava Vidal, I almost forgot it there. And she's a patron for Give Racism the Red Card, which is a charity, obviously fighting racism in football, obviously. And she was talking about the time when she was trying to do a sketch. Well, no, she was trying to do her sets. That's what it's called, for Chelsea players. And then that was around the time when John Terry was accused of being racist, and they were supporting John Terry, and they were talking smack about black people. And yeah, she basically didn't do the set. She left because they were starting to put the racial abuse towards her, and she wasn't going to stand for that. And she was basically talking about how football fans still see black people as very gifted athletically and physically, but very simple in the head. And that fascinated me, because not because I get easily offended by people judging me because I'm black, but because it fascinates me again that people actually look at what you look like with your skin pigmentation or your build, and they just presume your whole life story. Like, it's pathetic, really, because if you're a little bit more educated, you have to understand that people are more complex, mentally and even physically, than what they look like. Like, that's rule number one of being a simple human being with a salt grain of emotional intelligence. But oh well, some people just don't have that. But then again, racism is a taught behavior. So you have to look at the environments of people like that, where their parents or friends racially biased towards certain populaces. But that's, again, that is not anything for a 25-minute video. That's you can discuss that for months on end without taking a break. But alas, what can you do? But yeah, that's my take on the whole racism on football thing. I mean, you've still got, black people in recent years, bananas being thrown at them, and then they eat it, or people being, called the N word, people having to deal with monkey chants when they, play away games on different countries. Yeah, of course it's hard. Of course there's racism in football, just like there's racism in every other industry in the world. Like, what can you do? Apart from do your very best to kick it out and stomp it out. But in my personal opinion, racism will never die, because there'll always be ignorant people that think that they can find some sort of illusion of superiority within themselves, in comparison with somebody else, because of their own skin color and that other person's skin color. That, I don't think that's ever going to completely go away. But yeah, what did you guys think? If you like the video or like what I said, leave, like the video, share it with your friends. If you thought I could have touched upon something else, in a greater detail, leave a comment. If you liked my video, leave a comment. Subscribe to my channel, tap the bell so that you get all notifications. And yeah, I hope to see you guys soon. I've left some links in the description as to some of the videos and articles that I looked at for this video, and I hope you guys have a nice evening. Bye bye.